All right, y'all, welcome back to this next section where we're going to talk about warm-ups and how you can connect what you typically do in your warm-up sequence in daily rehearsals to an application students can do at home on their own without you and their other singers around them. So in this section, I just want to ask you to consider a couple things. How much singing do you expect them to be doing? Remembering that individual warm-ups are different than group warm-ups, and what are you expecting students to do for these warm-ups? What guidelines can you give them? So just a smidgen of a backstory on this approach and in blatant honesty. I think you're going to have several different types of students with this learning that struggle to adapt to it. You're going to have those students that can carry on no problem without you there. And you're also going to have students that are going to be they really are motivated by that group component. And so getting them to buy in is going to be something that you're going to have to consider. And I do all of my work from that framework because that's honestly kind of the student that I would be. I would be the choir student that's I'm not sure if I'm going to do this on my own, or I would really struggle without that motivation to have a choir teacher there doing it with me. So I try to construct everything here for that type of student and under the framework of okay, well, what would motivate me to want to adapt to this style of learning in this context? So that's some of the questions that I used to consider when framing this next section. And I just wanted to give you that full disclosure. So you'll notice that in this section are 3 guides. One is a planning guide for you. One is a planning guide for your students. And then there's an actual warm-up planning guide. Because I think that it's so important as we move into these next sections that you really think about how you're going to structure the work that you need /want /intend students to do every single day. I think it's kind of unrealistic for them to have a total mini rehearsal without you every single day and remotely. And maybe I'm wrong on that. And if that works for you, awesome, go for it. But I would challenge you to pick 1 or 2 things that you're going to focus on each day and have that be the focus. So maybe one day you have singers work on a section from warm-ups and another section of rehearsing to scores. And then the next day is literacy and rehearsing to scores. And then the other day is full warm-ups. And maybe the other day is full literacy. Because again, you're going to, I think it's unrealistic to expect your students to spend the entire class period working on the assignment, because you don't spend your entire class period working on your assignments. But thinking about how can you get the biggest bang for your buck in the shortest amount of time. And again, the whole mindset beside how I was structuring this for you and thinking through this and is if you relate what you're doing to something that students already know that you're doing in the classroom, I think it gives them greater context and doesn't feel like such a one-off, right? If you say, well, the activity that we're about to do is really based upon our warm-up sequence that we would be doing in class, and it would be the same, but it's just going to be a little bit different. That gives it a lot more validity and anchors them to a process they already know. So if you haven't already done this, take a quick moment, brainstorm through what your current warm-up sequence is in the classroom, and then what you expect your singers to warm up, how you expect them to warm up without you, and what do you expect them to warm up with you. And then one other context is I just gave you a sample of my in-class warm-up sequence, and that starts with body, breath, mid-voice resonation. Then I take the head voice and bring it down, and then I do some flexibility, articulations, extension work, and then some component of listening, which then leads into literacy components that we'll talk about in the next section. But what I would perhaps do is take a body section for the day, or take a breath section for the day, or maybe you have students just working on head voice for the day, because it's so important to remember that, and I already said this, I'm just going to reiterate it, that individual warm-ups are so different from group warm-ups, and especially some of us have singers that thrive on choir because they never really have to sing by themselves, depending on how you've structured your program. So some singers might be too insecure to sing by themselves. I was also talking to another student recently, and they were like, I can't sing at home. My parent works from home, and they'll be mad if I'm singing. And, that's a whole other thing. But you legitimately don't know the proximity that your singers have to one another during this. So I think these are all really great things to consider as you're planning out, brainstorming, and again, always anchoring what you intend to do in this virtual setting with what you do in an in-person setting so that you're building that connection, you are building that routine. In the next segment, we'll give you some tips and tricks and implementation ideas for how you can do that as you connect warm-ups for this section.